Fong Li, the CEO, said there'll be 700 publicly traded companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet by the end of the year. And even internally, we're like, what is he talking about? And then about an hour later, we all looked at each other and said, you know what? He's right. It's going to be 700. And we're on track a little bit for that.
If the United States buys Bitcoin at any price before the other countries do, then the United States wins compared to the other countries.
This is similar to, when Galileo and Copernicus were saying, like, I think that the Earth isn't at the center. I've got some math here. And the church was like, that doesn't work for us. And so this cycle thing doesn't work for a lot of people.
2025 is year one, and how we'll define that looking back is anyone's guess.
Are we going to get to the point where some Fortune 100 company is going to drop 10 or $100 billion on Bitcoin? Sure makes sense. You look down the Fortune 100 and how much cash they have on the books, and it's a melting ice cube. It's just the treasury is disappearing. So it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would keep sitting on all that cash and T-bills.
You're the bank. You can do any sort of banking, insurance product, reinsurance product. I mean, the things that really move the big blocks around, I guess, just shy of being a nation state.
Hi, Ed, and hi, Tim. Like one of my rare episodes with two guests. I do it rarely, but I always love it because then there's like three people talking about Bitcoin. It's always better than just two people. Tim was already on the podcast, so maybe let's jump directly to Ed. Maybe give us some background of like who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. Everybody always wants to know about your Bitcoin background story, but it's weird. It's like you go to the dentist, nobody ever says like, hey, tell me your background as a dentist, but everybody needs to know your Bitcoin background story. I've always been an early adopter. I saw an article on Gawker about this internet money, bought this Bitcoin and didn't know what to make of it. Bought it at $6. A year later, I needed some money. I went back and looked. It was still $6 and I sold it. Never knew that it went to 37 in between. A year and a half later, somebody said, what's this Bitcoin thing? I'm like, it's like internet money, $6. Went and checked the price. It was 1,000. I had a heart attack and went back to where I bought it saying, maybe I still have it. And I went to Mt. Gox, and of course, Mt. Gox was gone. So the old story is, should I be glad I got my original money back or sad I didn't self-custody? But in any case, at that point, I kind of started buying massively and crazily. In about 2015, 16 is when I just went all in, and no mortgage, no retirement accounts in Bitcoin, everything. And about 2019, I did a couple entrepreneurial things that all failed. And my wife said, you got to get a real job. Found a job with the Bitcoin conference, and then was fortunate to go work on a sidechain L2 project with Mara. And then Strategy called and wanted help with their conference, and I was lucky to go work for them for a while. But things are happening so quickly in this treasury space that some bigger opportunities came along. And I'm working with the first Bitcoin treasury company out of Mexico called Arcadia B, and also with Tim on Bitcoin Treasuries media /events/advisory.
I love that. Really, really cool. And the treasury, I really want to dive deep today into treasury companies. But before, for the few people that haven't caught the first episode with me and Tim, maybe Tim, give us some background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Sure. Yeah, I was introduced to Bitcoin in January of 2021 and spent several years just reposting every Bitcoin post on Twitter at the time that I thought was interesting. And through a series of events, started the Bitcoin Treasuries podcast just shy of a year ago through some relationships that, again, mostly through X, meeting people, and had the opportunity to interview Ryan and Jeff and some of the guys that kind of became the MSTR True North sort of podcast and group really covering MicroStrategy. So through the podcast and then the digital conference, now we're putting on a in-person conference next week in New York, and super excited to have lots of the executives and service providers and investors all in one place.
Yeah, the space, the treasury space, like really evolved. I first, when I heard about strategy in 2020, I thought this whole thing will go way faster than it went. And now it seems like now it really got traction in 2024, 2025. How do you look at the treasury company space in general right now?
It's an unlock, right? Throughout the history of Bitcoin, there was like when I bought my first Bitcoin, I think I put my credit card into some Japanese website, and then they said, "Yeah, you have Bitcoin," but who knows what I really had? We found out that it wasn't real Bitcoin or whatever. Then Coinbase came along, and then you had mining companies, and then you had all these different unlocks to allow people to get access to Bitcoin. And so what Seyr really did is he figured out this way to not only allow corporations to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but then start to unlock fixed income markets and equity markets, and really allow some of that investor base and debt markets that can't get access to Bitcoin to now have access to it. And so that's really where I kind of summarized what the treasury companies are doing is they're unlocking a whole new market for Bitcoin. With, of course, strategy being, I don't even want to use the phrase in the lead because they're so far beyond in the lead. But they're doing things years ahead of everybody else, and then everybody else is going to try to figure out how to get to that level that they're at. Are we going to get to the point where some Fortune 100 company is going to drop 10 or $100 billion on Bitcoin? Sure makes sense. You look down the Fortune 100 and how much cash they have on the books, and it's a melting ice cube. It's just their treasury is disappearing. So it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would keep sitting on all that cash and T-bills. But the career risk for the executives, the boards, the vanguards that are telling them not to do it, it's just going to take time. But those unlocks just keep coming and coming and coming for Bitcoin. ETFs, massive unlock. You don't see these unlocks going away either. Even when people say, "Oh, well, it was banned in China," no, it wasn't. They just turned off the on and off ramps for a while, and then people found a way around them. So, in summary, that's kind of where I feel this whole treasury market is. It just provided this huge unlock. And at the Bitcoin for Corporation conference put on by Strategy in May, Fong Li, the CEO, said there will be 700 publicly traded companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet by the end of the year. And even internally, we're like, what is he talking about? What is he going out on the limb with that number? And then about an hour later, we all looked at each other and said, you know what? He's right. It's going to be 700, and we're on track a little bit for that to get to that many public companies. And then on top of that, 10x that for the number of private companies. So it's happening.
It's super interesting when I look at treasury companies because I mean, first of all, maybe it's maybe we should define it because I think there's like two different kind of treasury companies. There's companies that just have profit and put their profits into into Bitcoin, and then there are treasury companies that on top of that, like a strategy, provide kind of capital unlocking. How do you look at that where we have more and more treasury companies that don't only put it on the treasury, but also like trying to service that unlock capital? And what I'm also like kind of wondering, how much space is there? Like I'm like how many of those treasury companies that basically mostly do that do we need a strategy, as you said, like it's not a lead, it's like they're in a whole nother level and a whole nother sphere as they're so far ahead. How much of that do we need versus the treasury companies that just like put Bitcoin in their balance sheet?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment and then I'll let Tim dive into this. But I mean, how many T-bill treasury companies do we need? Right? How many? If Seyr had said we're going to be a diamond treasury company, then everybody has to learn about diamonds. It's just a new pristine asset that companies can use to protect their wealth, and it's something that Tim and I are now thinking about all the time. Is like, what is a Bitcoin treasury company? Does that mean they have to be all in, or can they just have a little? And what is a Bitcoin company? Nobody has those answers yet. But Tim, why don't you add on to that?
Yeah, to your point, Robin, it's if you just have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, but you're not really engaging the capital markets, then maybe that's one bucket and you can give it a name, like you have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, But when I think of a Bitcoin treasury company, there's probably only a few dozen right now. Companies like Strategy, like MetaPlanet, like Smarter Web Company that are engaging the capital markets and using these terms like Bitcoin per share, Bitcoin yield, and are out in front of the media, both traditional and social media, to engage with the retail investors in particular. Very, very visible, very transparent, and updating, if not daily, usually weekly, instead of just the regular TradFi quarterly reports and quarterly earnings calls that come out. So, yeah, to Ed's comment about what is a Bitcoin company, that conjures up in my mind, a service or a product that, like an exchange, right? Maybe that's a Bitcoin company, but I'll be intrigued, along with everyone else, to see, is there a Bitcoin-based like financial services or products and services along with Bitcoin yield that can be a growth company, right? Whether it's like growth or, even hyper growth along with engaging the capital markets. I don't think we've really seen that yet. And so I think 6-12 months from now, or maybe even 6 or 12 weeks from now, we could start seeing these Bitcoin treasury companies doing things that maybe we haven't seen before. So I think very nascent and, just at the beginning of all of this. And it is interesting that it took 3-4 years to have a fast follower or a slow follower of MicroStrategy. But now it seems that, you have these groups that are, have said publicly they're going to every capital market in the world to launch these things. And so here we go.
Yeah, it can be like the tide coming in. When you're sitting there at the beach, you don't notice each individual wave adding to the tide coming in, but then all of a sudden the water's up on your towel, and then the water's up on the rocks, and it's just like, whoa, when did this happen? And that's kind of what's happening in this space. I mean, my feed is kind of telling me now that people are worried about there being too many treasury companies, and once they all have all this Bitcoin, what are they going to do with it? And I'm like, okay, that's the next part of the wave that comes in that people are going to discuss. And in the Bitcoin world, there's words that just appear all of a sudden, like ordinals. You go back and look at ordinals 3 years ago, it wasn't even a word. And then now it's ingrained in the Bitcoin lore. So this whole treasury thing it's early, but at the same time, it's quickly evolving and the waves are coming in.
Yeah, and I think it's a very natural progression. I just talked about that in the last podcast, where when you thought about the Bitcoin game theory in 2011, you would have thought about companies at some point buying it, and the same people are now complaining, "Oh, why are companies buying?" So, like, I don't get that argument at all.
Yeah, no, and that's a point I try to make a lot, is that they say, "Oh, well, these two are competing." I'm like, when the pizza is growing as fast as the pizza is growing, everybody's pizza gets bigger. And I don't call that competition, right? Competition is where you have a scarce resource. It's the market for shoes. And it's like Nike and Adidas are competing, but the Bitcoin pizza is growing so fast, we're all winning. And so it's not really competition.
Yeah, and it's almost like when like if there's a new company added to the Bitcoin treasury, this is a company that will actually work for all of the Bitcoin hodlers. So basically they are giving their financial energy and the financial energy from their customers and from the whole ecosystem towards Bitcoin. Like that's I would be more concerned if there's no Bitcoin treasury company. Like if there's non-Bitcoin treasury companies in 2025, I think that would be a red flag for Bitcoin after 16 years. How do you look at it?
As an early holder of Bitcoin, that's what makes you most upset, is when you got in early, you've built this stack, and then somebody just comes in with their $100 million and buys more than you have, and you're like, God damn it. Okay, it's good for all of us, but at the same time, I was supposed to get ahead of that guy. What happened? Anyways.
Yeah, maybe that's where some of the envy comes from. Where like, oh, like Seyr only started in 2020, and now he has like with strategy and also personal like over 600,000 Bitcoin. And I remember talking just like 1.5 or almost 2 years ago, where it was a question: will he get to 1% of the supply? And now it's like 3 times that.
No, with no end in sight. The higher the price goes, the more they can buy, which is you look at the spreadsheets, you look at the math, and it's like the debt markets will loan them more and more and more as the price goes up. It's not going to get to the point where they're buying 1 Bitcoin per week. I mean, it'll just keep accelerating. It's pretty insane.
And it's interesting. I mean, Tim, you covered that probably like so much also with all the media things and podcasts that you're doing. Is there like, do you foresee where those treasury companies kind of end up in a Bitcoin world? Because if I think about even someone that is privately having like 10 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin right now, at some point, this will be such a big amount that he can actually play as a small local bank. And if someone with 100 Bitcoin can play a small local bank, like it's interesting. It is a very interesting thought experiment. Like what can strategy with, let's say, 700, 800,000 Bitcoin do in a Bitcoin world? That's just like such an interesting, like, where do we end up and what role will those treasury companies actually play when they maybe are even service providers in the financial space?
Yeah. I mean, it's the age old question of what can you do when you have the money? And it's like, well, I guess whatever you want. Right. But that's, I think, the thing that a lot of individuals, a lot of these institutions, corporates in New York specifically, like they're just not getting yet, is that these Bitcoin treasury companies have the money. They already have the money. It's not like they have some okay asset that they can maybe borrow against. Like they have the most pristine collateral. So I think when some of those bells go off and people start to get it, you'll see quite a few things change, including the PE multiple or MNAV or whatever you want to calculate. It might just mirror what some of the companies in the S&P trade at, which is a lot more than 1 or 2 or 4x book value. So what will they do? I mean, many conversations swirling around about, to your point, banking, insurance products, any sort of, like you're the bank. You can do any sort of banking, insurance product, reinsurance product. I mean, the things that really move the big blocks around, I guess, just shy of being a nation state.
You're not thinking big enough. A small local bank. How about a privately held central bank? Put that into ChatGPT, and it goes crazy, man. A privately held central bank is probably where we're going.
So that the strategy one is so big that it almost acts as a centrally, like a central bank for a large portion of people.
Yeah.
Crazy to think about that.
No, it is. It breaks it. That's. I can't speak for Seyr, but I know that he is thinking way ahead on this, and he uses ChatGPT to think way ahead on this. And we're going to a place that's going to really break a lot of brains on Wall Street. Their incentive systems are all tied around this old fiat system and how they can make money on it. But Bitcoin breaks it all, and so we're continually getting to these new thought processes that are going to make us wonder, why did we structure it that way for so long?
I waited for that question for someone to speak about that has no more clue about that than me. And I think you both are great for that. Someone came up to me and asked like, oh, if the government really wants to accumulate Bitcoin and they have right now, like, let's say 0 Bitcoin, like, USA like has 20,000, like not a lot of Bitcoin, as they got to know that they have less than they actually thought they have. And now they have strategy in the jurisdiction of saying like, oh, we could acquire, similar to maybe what they did with the 10% of Intel, what Trump did. Like, I don't know the full story of that. Is there any chance that at some point Strategy is just such a big company that they almost have to be nationalized, or like some sort of like bigger corporation collaboration with the USA?
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. To you, Tim.
I think it's an interesting question. I think it's a timely question. My thought is no. I think you can have these private or publicly traded companies, and you can also have sovereigns buying Bitcoin however they choose to do that, whether it's through private sales, OTC desks, spot Bitcoin. And I think part of this puzzle that might need to be put together is, on one hand, you have Bitcoin, which is such a scarce asset with a cap, 21 million. That's all there's ever going to be. On the other hand, you have fiat, which is can only be issued through the central banks, but it's unlimited. And so, the point being, I don't think the governments should be or are concerned about driving up the price of Bitcoin. If the United States buys Bitcoin at any price before the other countries do, then the United States wins compared to the other countries. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin's at $1 million or $10 million a coin. It's that game theory. So that's my thought there.
Yeah, we've got kind of a broken thought process. When everybody was having these 100,000 parties, and I was like, wait, 100,000 in what, pesos or yen, or it's like, oh no, dollars. I'm like, yeah, because you live in the U.S. and the euro is so close to the dollar. It's like, okay, then 100,000, but it's just a random number. And as Tim just said, like the government driving up the price of Bitcoin. That's not what they do. What the government does is they drive down the value of their fiat. And so it's just so much easier to talk about this stuff with someone from Argentina, someone from Venezuela, someone from Zimbabwe, someone from any one of the 200 countries that are on the bottom of the list. They get it in 1 second, because they already have their wealth in dollars somewhere. They go, I don't trust my local currency. I have it in dollars. I'm like, okay, so let's take one more step. What would you do if you wanted to be better than dollars? And they're like, but dollars are just fine. I'm like, okay, that's a valid argument until they're not. And we don't know when that's going to be, and we don't know how fast this money printer is going to go. But you got to kind of get yourself out of this mindset of the dollar being the end all currency or wealth metric. It's just a denominator in the Bitcoin equation.
Is there a chance that Bitcoin will be that end all wealth denominator where people will say what is, like, how many Bitcoin does the company has, and like how many Bitcoin do you have? Like that's the denominator.
It's either that or Fartcoin, one of the two. Yeah, I mean, it's not no, but does Bitcoin become the denominator? I mean, it's I'm gonna get it backwards. Is 21 over infinity? Yeah, 21 million over infinity. The guy from Sweden that wrote the book. It just changes all the formulas. It changes all the denominators. I just had another neighbor last night that he was like, well, how do I know that somebody's not going to change the code to be more than 21 million? And they just go, just because, leave me alone. It's like it's code, and if you don't want to learn it, you don't have to learn it. I'm to that point where I've been in it so long. I just get tired of explaining it. But that whole concept that there only being 21 million is the hardest part for people to get their head around when they don't want to. And then once they do, then they're all in. It's just that barrier of saying, I don't get this. How could there only be 21 million?
Yeah, because we never had that. Like it's such a concept that we never experienced, that there's something digital, global, and fully capped with 21 million, like that everyone has a reason to buy also. Like that's something completely new. Maybe also because we've talked a bit one or two times already about Bitcoin yield and Bitcoin per share, just to make sure that the audience also knows what this is. Maybe you can, Tim or Ed, whoever wants to take it, explain like what is a Bitcoin yield and Bitcoin per share, and especially like why do they matter?
Go ahead, Tim.
So Bitcoin per share, as a metric, you want it to be increasing. So if the corporation is buying more Bitcoin, then the Bitcoin per share, if it's accretive to the shareholder, should be going up. It should be increasing. And Bitcoin yield is an expression of how much the Bitcoin per share is going up over a certain amount of time, usually year over year. Year to date.
I do love the watches from Coin Vigilante, but today I have a very special message, not from me, but from the CEO himself, Carlos from Coin Vigilante. Let's hear him.
To all the Robin Seyr podcast community, I'm Carlos Estrada from Coin Vigilante, and we're sponsors of the show, and we're going to give you a very special discount exclusive to you, 10% off your order at coinvigilante.com when you use Robin at checkout. We have really nice watches that you guys can buy right now for 10%. This is a transparency edition, beautiful watch. These watches are worn in over 55 countries and counting. This discount is just for you, exclusive to the Robin Seyr podcast. We have limited editions, we have limited productions. These watches come in very nice packaging, boxing material, and they are collector's item for Bitcoiners only. Enjoy the discount. Thanks for supporting the show and Coin Vigilante.
I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. You get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Is this something like, we know earnings per share and like all the other metrics that like companies are used to be measured in? Is this something where like at some point every company will have a Bitcoin per share, where like, okay, how many Bitcoin do you actually have in saying like, oh, how legit of a business kind of you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing we do with loans, with mortgages, or any kind of loan you get, right? You're basically saying, I'm going to take this loan out at 9% because I feel like my income is going to rise at 10%, right? If you took out a loan at 9% and your income is only increasing at 3%, well, eventually you're going to get behind. And so what Bitcoin treasury companies are doing is issuing debt at 9%, 10%, whatever you want that number to be, knowing that Bitcoin's going to appreciate in dollar terms at 30%. And so they're essentially getting future money at a discount today to buy Bitcoin at a rate that they know is going to increase over time. And that's how that Bitcoin per share increases by issuing cheaper debt in the future.
I also love that small graphic from I think Jesse Myers and Seyr talked a lot about it, and then the additional like small pipes and where you see the products of strategy and where the pipes is going towards Bitcoin. I think it's for me. Treasury company is almost like a small black hole that's slowly opening up that sucks up all the financial energy from the fiat world to the Bitcoin world.
But yeah, Tim and I get crazy amounts of inbound from companies that are coming up with new ideas, treasury companies that have unique markets in which they have to exploit different ways to raise that debt. I think the creativity has just started. Strategy is at the forefront of that, of coming up with these creative instruments. But now you get into these other markets, these other places. Maybe you'll have Bitcoin dividends. Maybe you'll have Bitcoin-based governmental bonds that you can then reinvest. The amount of creativity that's going to come out of Bitcoin treasury companies to unlock fixed income markets, it's going to be crazy. You'll open up your browser or your email every morning and see a new way that somebody's come up with to play with this.
Is it fair to say that 2025 is kind of the starting of the real start of Bitcoin treasury companies? Obviously 2020 is like the official one with Seyr, but it took so long for the treasury companies to really, like, it took so long for someone to follow up on what Seyr is doing since now 5 years.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think on that one? It's hard for me to put a random place that we're at when we rotate around the sun as a starting point. It's like it's a blur. It's just a blur now. I don't even remember the years anymore.
Yeah, it reminds me of over the past 5 years, some of Seyr's presentations and talking points where he's like, this is year 0. And then like the next year, it's like, this is year 1. And then the next year, it's like, this is year 1. So it's like, it's kind of hard for any of us to pinpoint like where year 0, and say that with the utmost respect to everyone in the industry, because it's just like when you're a fish in the fishbowl, you're like, I don't know, I'm just here hanging out, doing the best I can. But I think with the launch of these levered Bitcoin equities in more and more jurisdictions, I think that's at least many, many data points pointing towards what you're saying, Robin, that 2025 is year 1, and how we'll define that looking back is anyone's guess. But I think that's a really strong theme that we're seeing this year for sure. And it's not just like a mining company putting some convertible debt on, and everybody, right, or the talking points early on, right, it's like Block and like companies that are putting some Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I mean, you're seeing actual leveraged capital markets strategy and companies executing this plan. So I do feel strongly that this is year 1. And we'll report back in 2026.
Yeah, I'm a admitted cycle guy, and that comes from this will be my 4th cycle, and having worked at Mara and seeing how the halving affects their business model, how the irrational exuberance that happens every 4 years where people just flood into it. We're still trying to get our head around the math of it and why the cycles, but it's the code and the math that creates a cycle. So I love the phrase, this time is different, because it just tells me that it's not. And a lot of people out there now are saying, nope, this time it's different, institutional money, da, da, da. I'm like, it's the institutional money that's going to cause that irrational exuberance that's going to then recorrect. And then we go through another bottom. And if I could prove it, I would. I mean, this is similar to, when Galileo and Copernicus were saying, like, I think that the Earth isn't at the center. I've got some math here. And the church was like, that doesn't work for us. And so this cycle thing doesn't work for a lot of people because they want it not to be this up and down and up and down. So what's going to cause the next downturn is there's no more Tierra Lunas out there. I hope there's no more Celsiuses out there. There's no more Mount Goxes. There's no more ICO crazes, but a lot of people are pointing to these treasury companies saying somebody's going to screw it up and there's going to be too much that's going to go into it. One of them's going to screw up. It's going to cause market to panic. I don't know. It could be this Bitcoin Core versus NOTs war that's going on that causes some kind of panic in the market. But we're going to get, let's say, Fong's right, 700 public treasury companies by the end of the year. And then next year it'll pull back. Some of them won't survive, and then we'll rebuild from there. And by 2029, it'll be thousands.
Just because I will probably get hammered in the comment section if I don't ask what you guys also thinking about core versus not. It's fascinating. I get comments on that topic currently on podcasts that have nothing to do with that at all. Do you guys have any opinions on core versus not?
Yeah, I mean, having been I was orange pilled through doing a code review with Michael Tidwell in Atlanta, and I saw the purity of the code, and I was like, okay, I'm in. And so I love the technical events. And when I was working on this L2 at Lamar, I would rather be over on the technical side than on the treasury side. But TabConf coming up here in October is going to be fun, man. I mean, it's in Atlanta, and there's going to be the core and NOTs guys going at each other. The way I frame it is, it's the beauty of Bitcoin. The beauty of Bitcoin is that it's philosophical. It's about doing the right thing. It opens up these discussions. There's no one person or even group of people in charge. Consensus has to prevail. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin. Just had a discussion with a guy yesterday who's on the very technical side of this. And we were kind of discussing of whether or not Bitcoin's getting too big and we can't reach consensus because there's too many people in it now. I don't know, but that's just the beauty of Bitcoin. It always figures out a way to fix itself. And the core people are taking their side, the NOTs are taking their side, and let's just get the bucket of popcorn and see where it all plays out. But the block size wars work themselves out. And, Bitcoin is beautiful that way. So I didn't give you an answer, but I gave you an answer, right?
I like that answer a lot because it's almost like I feel like having people talking about Bitcoin is probably a good thing about Bitcoin. Having people debate about it, it's probably a good thing. The worst thing that can happen, that people no longer talk about Bitcoin and don't debate about Bitcoin, especially in the adoption phase. Yeah,
I mean, if you look at some of the decisions that FIFA has made in soccer over the years, the fans don't have a voice. The players don't have a voice sometimes. I mean, when they went to VAR, it was like, we don't want VAR. Just come on, play the game. You're slowing it down. So those kind of changes, if you really need consensus, it can take a little longer. It's a little more debate, but truth prevails.
Absolutely. Tim, any thoughts?
No thoughts.
I love that.
That's kind of my area, but yeah, I'll get Tim up to speed on core versus NOTs.
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole discussion. And it's also the thing, I'm surprised how emotionally it is, like how emotionally charged it is. Like it's like there has been technical discussions beforehand. And I was not around for the block size war, so I cannot really talk about that just because I wasn't around for that. But since I'm around since 2020, basically, I haven't seen any technical debate being so emotional than this one.
Yeah, no, and it is an important discussion. And relating this back to the treasury companies, a lot of people accuse Seyr of being an ossifier, where he just wants to lock the code down. And I kind of asked him this question directly, and he said, no, I'm not an ossifier. I don't even know what that word means. What he says is, you do not change the code on the most pristine money that's ever been created unless you know how it's going to affect people 5, 10, 50, 100 years from now. And so keep the core code solid, build on L2, build on L3, but don't screw around with the core code unless you absolutely know what it's going to lead to. That's not ossification. That's just caution, right? And so should treasury companies be listening to the devs? Should they be listening to what's going on in L2? Absolutely. It could really, really affect them. But at the same time, they don't have much of a say. The miners, the nodes, the devs, all the players that Lynn Alden identified so well in her paper, ultimately they all have to get to consensus and decide.
How much are actually treasury companies involved in running their own nodes or spinning them up? They would have the financial capabilities to like run multiple nodes for multiple different use cases, or maybe just like have more security in the network, because there's sometimes this debate of like, do we have enough nodes? Do we need more ones? And like Strategy that has a lot of Bitcoin could go ahead and say like, hey, let's spin up a bunch of nodes to defend the network or something like that.
Not going to happen. I mean, of course, Amara, a Clean Spark and them, yeah, they're a treasury company. They're very deep into it, but the rest of them, I got to be careful here, but they're looking at Bitcoin as this pristine asset, and that's it, right? The same way they would a T-bill or a stack of diamonds or whatever. So the inner workings of Bitcoin and such is just not on their radar and not their concern. Should it be? I don't know. Maybe not. This comes back to the technology adoption life cycle, right? In the early adopters, they get all into it and they say, okay, we've all been orange pilled. I've written about this, that I think orange pilling is over. The people who are orange pilled early adopters, that's done. We're now moving on to early majority. And the early majority is Trump saying, hey, Bitcoin is so great and I'm going to do my own coin as well. It's Seyr saying, this is a treasury asset. I don't need to do proof of reserves. And everybody seems to pardon him on that. So early majority does what early majority does. There's a great example in Jeffrey Moore's book on this, where he says, the early computers in the 80s, you had to buy the components and put them together and put jumpers and cables and then install the operating system manually on a floppy drive. Great. Then IBM and Acer and HP said, hey, we're gonna make a vanilla box that you literally can't open. And all the early adopters are like, that'll never work. Who's ever going to buy a computer that you can't open and play with? Well, guess who won, right? So that's going to happen with Bitcoin. Each new wave of adoption is going to have their own interpretation of it, and the early adopters will sit by and complain. But as long as we keep control on a consensus, decentralized model, everything will be okay.
I heard, and again, that's something that I heard because I wasn't around for that time because I'm too young for that. But in the early times of email,
what do you mean by that? What you're too young for that. I read between the lines there, but go on. Go ahead.
But I was talking about the email area where when email came out in the early stages, a lot of people thought that everyone will run their own email servers, and now it's kind of like everyone is kind of using Gmail and maybe some other providers, and not everyone is running their own email servers. And I was thinking about like how will self custody, running your own nodes, node will develop in a Bitcoin world. What place will it be? Will it always be like a niche thing that some people will do, and the mass majority just like trust basically in third parties is the same as it develops with email?
Yeah, Tim, you've done 160 episodes now and talked to a lot of people. What's your impression of the Bitcoin treasury space and their desire or ability to get into the weeds on Bitcoin?
I think you'll have a very small percentage of the treasury companies and of the retail investors really go down the rabbit hole and want to get into the physical and the technical pieces of it. I think for the majority of them, they're just going to be focused on, the investors are largely with these treasury companies because they want leveraged Bitcoin. They want 1.5 or 2x Bitcoin. And the treasury companies are there for the leverage position, certainly. And then the ETFs are certainly there for investors that they are maybe in a part of their life where the only way they can trust Bitcoin is by it being wrapped in an ETF by BlackRock. I've had many of those conversations where they're very comfortable buying IBIT because they, their entire life, they've known what the BlackRock name, maybe not their entire lives, but for many years that these trusted brands are adding to the adoption, and all of this is good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think it's that's the overall thing that was getting towards, like, even outside of the Bitcoin Treasury space. I think the whole Bitcoin space, the mass market will come in with indirect or like third party exposure to Bitcoin. I asked, and I'm very much about self custody, and I asked my own audience, like, oh, how many of you guys have tried self-custody? Not even are you doing self-custody? And only 50% said, like, oh yes, like I'm watching the show and I do self-custody. But self-custody, for someone that promotes self-custody on almost every show, it's like, oh, only 50% actually do it. That shows how few people actually do it in the overall Bitcoin space. And then it's like, yeah, and this is the early adopters, and not like the late majority.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got over here on my desk, I've got about 20 hardware wallets, right, that I've accumulated over time. And none of them really have anything on it right now. But I know if I was to get hit by a bus right now, my kids would be like looking at those hardware wallets going, oh no, what are we going to do here? It's fun. It's fun to know that you have it all. I mean, I remember in 2017, living in Amsterdam, and I had a significant amount on a ledger in the safe. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and go running over to that safe and open it up just to make sure the ledger was there. It was just the weirdest sensation, of like going, oh my God, what if the ledger's gone? It's just because you would never put that much money in the safe in the house, but having it on a ledger was like, yeah, okay, it's there, it's in the house. It's the weirdest sensation. But if you don't mind, let us, depending on when this airs or when people are listening to it, next Wednesday, Wednesday, September 17th, is our Bitcoin Treasuries Unconference NYC. If you are in New York, or you really want to learn more about the Bitcoin Treasury space, get on a plane, get in your car, come to the conference on the 17th. It's at Levon Midtown. You can either find it on Luma or on our website, bitcointreasuries.media. And if you're not able to make it, it will be live streamed on Tim Kotzman's YouTube channel, as well as Bitcoin Treasuries on X and a whole bunch of other places. It's going to be something you're going to want to see. We have an Emmy Award winning producer that's going to be doing something like you've never seen before. There will be small stage near the front of the room, surrounded by people like a town hall. We'll have thought leaders on stage talking for a few minutes about custody, about proof of reserves, about yield, about MNAV, and then we'll take the microphones into the audience to get comments and suggestions. It's going to be an amazing event, which is starting with a Michael Seyr keynote. He'll also participate in a couple of the sessions. But yeah, and if this is if you're listening to this after the 17th, you can find the replay in many places, and it's something you're really going to want to see. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to shamelessly plug that.
What do you guys think are the main topics that will be discussed there? You brought up MNAV, something that we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah, and if your editors can edit this, we do have to jump in 5 minutes for another podcast at the top of the hour. So I'll answer that, and then maybe one more question. Okay, cool. And we're back. Yeah, the topics were selected by the attendees. We came up with a list of 20 topics. We put out a survey to the people that bought tickets, and they picked the top 10 topics. Like I said, there's one on MNAV. There's one on, are the metrics that we're using all wrong? The final session will be Seyr and Brian Dixon and Mark Moss talking about what are Bitcoin Treasury companies. Is it a whole new class of company? We're going to have a really fun session on why traditional TradFi media doesn't get Bitcoin with Natalie Brunell, Mike Germano, and TJ Miller. So yeah, it's going to be 10 different topics that are going to have some of the best thought leaders. We did it a little backwards. Normally these conferences go and find the speakers they want, and then they try to figure out what the hell they're going to talk about. We came up with the 10 topics that the people wanted to hear, and then went and found the best people for those sessions. And so it's going to be 7.5 hours that you're just not going to want to walk away from the screen for.
That's awesome. We have one question to ask each and every one of my guests, and I already asked that to Tim. So the question today goes just to you, Ed. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Boy, I did live in Mexico for 13 years, fluent in Spanish, so I know Mexico really well. I would say that don't trust your TV when it comes to Mexico. You're probably safer in Mexico than you are in most developed countries. The stuff you see about cartels or this and that, it's happening, but it's in corners of the country, and it doesn't happen to tourists. It doesn't happen to regular people. Beautiful country, amazing food. Hardest decision you'll ever have to make is, do I wear short sleeves or long sleeves? Wonderful people. Don't watch too much of the news when you're looking at a country that that you really don't know well, where you haven't been on the ground.
Yeah, like I think film, movies, and series like influence a lot of what we think about countries. That is often not true. Really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast, and it's so fun. That question, it fits so nicely. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without actually knowing who the next guest is. And the previous guest asked such a fitting question, and the question is, "What's your favorite Bitcoin conference?" It's like. I really did not tell them who's next.
You go first, Tim.
Well, historically, my favorite looking back Bitcoin conference was Miami 2021 because it was my first one. And you had Seyr and Max Kaiser and Jack Dorsey and Jack Mallers. And it was just such an electric, right coming out of COVID. Everyone just wanted to get out of their houses and party and be together, and that was really, really, really special. And I'm hopeful that the Unconference here in New York, focused on Bitcoin Treasuries, will be definitely in the top 5 as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with the combination of TabConf, which is here in Atlanta every October. It's our local Atlanta group that puts it on, and it's just a fantastic. It's, once again, the agenda is open sourced on GitHub. It's just a great event. And then Charlie Spears and his team and what they're doing with OpNext is just really spectacular, and getting people together to talk about the technical side of Bitcoin. Those are a couple of my favorite events.
Awesome. Then yeah, thank you so much, Ed, and thank you so much also, Tim, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you and find all the details about the event also?
Yeah, they can go to bitcointreasuries.media. We have the agenda, we have the speakers, and we have the link to tickets and more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim and Ed, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.